Hey, what's up guys? This is Ken for oh my god, I need to shave. Hey, what's up guys? This is Ken for TalkAndroid.com, and today we're taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy S8. I've been super excited to take a look at the S8, especially since most of you should know that I've got a Galaxy S7 Edge as my personal device. So I was really excited to see what the S8 had to offer. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got in the specs. First and foremost, you will notice a 5.8-inch Super AMOLED display with 1440 by 2960 resolution and Gorilla Glass 5. As far as the operating system, it is running Android 7.0 with the ever-loved TouchWiz UI, and it is sporting an octa-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processor with an Adreno 540 GPU. Now these specs are specific to the US model. As always, Samsung is stuck with their in-house Exynos processors for the international models. Now in addition to that, it is running 4 gigs of RAM, and this time around we've got 64 gigs of internal storage standard and still an SD card slot, which is super nice. On the back there, you've got a 12 megapixel f1.7 aperture rear camera, and on the front we've got an 8 megapixel f1.7 aperture front camera. Now as with the S7, this is still IP68 certified water and dust resistant. And like the Note 7, we have gone with a USB-C port, and we still have a headphone jack. Now in addition to the fingerprint scanner, we do have an iris scanner, and powering all this nonsense is a 3000 milliamp hour battery, which is actually kind of an interesting choice considering that the S7 Edge, which has about the same screen size, was running like a 3500 milliamp hour battery. So slight downsize in the battery when you compare it to the screen size. So let's go ahead and go into the hardware. First and foremost, let's go ahead and start with the actual overall aesthetic. This is a really truly premium build as we've seen with the last couple of phones that Samsung has put out, and they're definitely not slacking off on that. So we've got a metal and glass build. This is a very sleek device, sits really well in the hand, very easy to hold, especially with such a big screen. Now the only downside to that is that it is very slick, which if you have a case or a skin on it, it shouldn't be an issue, and it also attracts fingerprints like crazy, especially the black model in particular. Now we do have some side buttons here, the power and lock button, as well as the volume rocker and the dedicated Bixby button, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But yeah, these buttons, while they're thin, still have quite a bit of travel and are still pretty clicky, so it's not too bad. Now on to the next most noticeable thing, the display. This has the what Samsung is calling the Infinity display. Basically the idea behind the Infinity display is having a display with barely any bezels. So you can see here we have got the screen with barely any bezel at the top and the bottom, and also hardly any bezel on the edges, sort of keeping in line with the aesthetic that's been established with the Edge displays. And what a display it is super gorgeous, really brilliant, pretty accurate color reproduction. I find that the saturation on this isn't as hot or as oversaturated as with the S7 Edge, which actually isn't a bad thing. I kind of think most of the phones tend to oversaturate their colors out of the box anyways. Now with it being an AMOLED screen, it does hold up pretty well in direct sunlight, and it gets pretty bright. And this does feature an always-on display. Unfortunately, it hasn't really been approved upon from the S7 or the S7 Edge. You might remember a constant complaint with the previous iterations was that it didn't show you a whole lot of relevant information. It was just the icons from the apps, nothing else. And this is pretty much the same story, which is kind of disappointing. But the screen is just so pretty. Like, I find myself just turning on the screen just to look at it. My actual response when I saw this screen was, oh my god. Now moving on down the rest of the hardware, call quality overall was excellent as usual, and the battery has actually seemed to improve from the S7 Edge. And the S7 Edge had a really brilliant battery, but with the S8, even with it being a 3000 milliamp hour battery over the S7 Edge's 3500 milliamp hour battery, I was still pulling about 20 plus hours in a single charge. Now as always, it does include fast charging in the box, and also it works with wireless chargers as well. I already have a Samsung wireless charger, so it worked a treat with that. Now with the speakers, the story is pretty much the same as with the S7 Edge, so you can look to my video there if you want to get the full story on that. Suffice it to say that it hasn't really changed at all. We still have our downward facing speaker there, no stereo speakers, and because of the waterproofing, I'd assume that's what's making the speakers sound a little bit thin. But hey, at least we have a headphone jack. Now moving over to the back of the phone, let's take a look at the fingerprint scanner. You'll notice that we don't have a hardware button in the middle anymore, and as such the fingerprint scanner has been moved over to the back next to the camera. Now I find this placement particularly awkward, but as we've already established, my hands would be that of like if you had a puppy and you gave it like little human baby hands. That's what my hands are like. so this is especially troublesome for me. And what I mean specifically by that is when I normally hold the phone, this is sort of the configuration, and with my weird little finger, I kind of have to stretch to reach that button. It's not a very natural placement for me. If you have bigger hands or maybe normal sized hands, this shouldn't be a problem. But with some of the other phones that I've seen that have a fingerprint scanner right smack dab in the middle, it seems a lot more natural. Again, at least for me. Now, as far as accuracy, it seems that it's about the same as the S7 Edge, if not a little bit worse. And what I mean by that is it seems to rarely ever work the first time around. Now, I don't know if that's because I have weird fingers, or if it's because that this outline for the fingerprint scanner is so shallow. There's not really a beveled edge on it. There's no texture to it. It's almost flush with the phone. So whenever I have to stretch over to find the fingerprint scanner, I usually find myself sort of hunting around for it. Oftentimes I'll just place my finger smack dab on the camera. And when I do land on it, usually it doesn't do anything, or it'll buzz for an incorrect read, and I'll have to place it a few times before it actually unlocks. So a little bit frustrating. But if you want to flip from frustrating to hilarious, the iris scanner works, and I wear glasses, and it still works with my glasses on. Unfortunately, I have to open my eyes hilariously large for it to actually work. Why this is the case, I'm not entirely sure, because Samsung is a Korean company. You would figure that for people with eyes like mine, it shouldn't be a problem. But literally, this is how wide I have to open my eyes, and I have to keep them held for like a couple of seconds for it to actually get a reading. But look at this, look at how wide my eyes are. So yeah, I promptly turned it off. I also have octopus tentacles for eyelashes though, so that could have something to do with it. Now, next to the fingerprint scanner, we do have our camera, and as I said before, it is a 12 megapixel camera with an f1.7 aperture. As far as the research that I didn't see any significant changes, or really any changes at all, between the S7's camera and the S8's camera, and as such, the performance seemed to be about the same. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Overall, it did have excellent dynamic range and really solid clarity, so the performance overall is still really solid. Now, a few things that I did notice, there is quite a bit of fall off, especially towards the corners. You'll notice here there's a lot of fuzziness going on, which is pretty common for wider lenses and sensors of this size, but it just seemed to be a lot more evident to me here. And the front-facing camera, particularly in direct sunlight, tends to look a little hot in places, which I guess is kind of common, but where I've seen other cameras blow out in similar situations, the Samsung's front camera usually stays pretty evenly exposed, and the contrast is a little bit lower, which tends to help it along, I think. Now, as far as low light, it still seems to hold up really well, but again, I did notice a couple of things, particularly with the ISO performance. Now, I wasn't able to do the same sort of low light photography that I had done with my S7 Edge video because I just didn't have enough time with this camera. But from the limited testing that I did do, it looks like the ISO performance was a little inconsistent, at least in this particular scenario. Now, as you can see here in these photos, they do have the same ISO, but one picture in particular has way worse noise performance and has more activity going on in the blue channel. You can also see here that the reflection of my RGB keyboard got blown out and way oversaturated. And taking a look in the background here, the bokeh is pretty unappealing. But hey, it is a smartphone lens, so what can you do? Video performance is pretty much the same story, overall really great, but there are a few things to note. Full HD looks really great, and the stabilization is solid. It can get a little jerky if there's too much movement, but overall there's no real warping going on, which is always really great to see. The Ultra HD video, by contrast, though, is a different story. Now, the resolution and clarity are great, obviously, but it is completely soiled by the stabilization. Now, it's super evident in the sample that I took here. There's a lot of vertical lines to look at, so if you look at those vertical lines, you'll see that there's a lot of warping going on, and it gets way worse when you whip the camera around. But even just walking at a normal pace, not trying to move the camera too much, it is just nauseating to look at. I mean, if you stack these up side by side, you can see what I'm saying. Now, the front video also looks really good, but again, it can look a little hot in areas, but it kind of keeps everything in check with that low contrast ratio. And of course, we do have my super scientific method of testing out the front camera. Moving on to software, like I said before, we do have Android 7.0 with the ever-loved TouchWiz running under the hood there. And my thoughts on TouchWiz are pretty much the same as they were with the S7 Edge video. Overall, it looks okay, but I don't know, I guess I've just been spoiled by Nova Launcher. Now, normally with review units, I always try to stick with the native UI and get the best feel that I can for the device as it's meant to be experienced, but after a few days, I just had to switch over to my preferred launcher with my favorite theme, and it just so that I could take advantage of the entire screen. But again, that's not necessarily a knock on TouchWiz. Like I said before, it has cleaned up quite a bit. It doesn't look that bad. I just like the flexibility that comes with Nova Launcher, but hey, that's just me. Now with Android 7.0 and that octa-core Qualcomm processor going on, there is no hiccups in usage, and switching between apps was pretty seamless. But as expected with the US carrier version, it does have a stupid amount of bloatware. I mean, I think I counted somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 plus AT&T apps, and after DirecTV updated, it kept constantly bugging me to try and open up the DirecTV app. No. Bad. Stop it. And this comes down to part of the reason why I went with an unlocked international version the last time, was that there was no bloatware on there. So I guess I was also spoiled by that experience, and I just forgot what it was like to have a carrier version of the phone. But hey, just disable the apps and at least you've got 64 gigs of storage, so it's not like it's really ruining the entire experience. Or if you wanted to take it the extra step, you could just root the phone and flash some new software on there. Now, the main attraction for the software features is the introduction of Bixby. Bixby, of course, as we all know, is the hot new virtual assistant, because we needed another one of those. I mean, on the other side of it, I guess it's nice to see an update to S-Voice, probably. I don't know, I never really used it. But I don't really use a whole lot of virtual assistants anyways. Now on paper, Bixby is pretty much an all-in-one virtual assistant consisting of 3 distinct parts. So you've got Bixby Vision, Bixby Home, and Bixby Voice. Now Bixby Vision has been a really big selling point in a lot of the marketing materials, and it spans a few different features I'll get into specifically in a second, but the whole idea is basically you can use the camera on this phone to scan things from products, so you can find shopping links, to locations, so you can figure out what it is that you're looking at or how far away a particular establishment might be from you. Now with Bixby Home, you can actually get direct integration with all of your smart home features, and then there's Bixby Voice, which talks, I guess. I'm not really sure. Now, part of the reason I'm not really sure isn't entirely because I'm an idiot. It's mostly because that a lot of these features weren't released or available when the phone came out. Even now, a lot of these features are still rolling out. I mean, I just saw a report the other day saying that on Verizon phones in particular, the shopping feature in Bixby Vision wasn't even available when other carriers had already rolled that out. That, coupled with the fact that I don't really use virtual assistants a whole lot, also coupled with the fact that I had limited time with this phone, as I said before, left me with kind of a weird impression of Bixby. As it stands now, I'm not really sure what it's for, and if that wasn't already kind of obvious. And by that I mean that a lot of these functions, at least again as they stand now, you can access in different apps in some form or another. For example, with Bixby Vision you can translate text, but I've done that before with Google Translate and it works just fine. Or with the shopping feature, you can actually just scan things in an Amazon's app. I mean, I guess the idea of having all these things in one place is kind of a neat idea, so you don't have to go to separate apps, but on that same token, having to open up different apps to do these things wasn't really ruining my sense of convenience. So really, at the end of the day, the only really consistent thing that it showed me was the weather. Oh, and calendar updates. It did show me those too. Actually, for a while, I thought it would only be directly integrated with Samsung's native calendar app, but to my pleasant surprise, it is working with Google Calendar, so there's that. Oh, and trending topics on Facebook. Now, there are a couple of ways to access Bixby. As I said before, there is a Bixby button. Bixby button, that sounds like a British insult. You're a dirty Bixby button. You stupid Bixby button. All right, sorry. Anyway, like I said, there's a Bixby button on the side here. Basically, if you push it, it'll take you straight to Bixby, where it'll show you all of your updates and reminders and whatever else Bixby does. And on top of that, if you swipe all the way to the right on the home screen, by default, there is a shortcut to Bixby, which is giving me flashbacks to HTC's Blink feed. But thankfully, you can turn that off if you need to. Now, the only function of Bixby that I was able to extensively test, again, in my short amount of time that I had with the phone, was Bixby Vision, which, again, was a really big selling point in a lot of the marketing that I saw. And it's cool. All right, let me get more specific. With the shopping function, it was kind of hit or miss. The big impression that was put upon me was that you could just scan an item and then it would tell you what that item was and how much it was on Amazon and where you could buy it. In reality, most of the time it wouldn't pick up any identifiable results, or it would pick up hilariously wrong results. Oh, or my favorite, it would give me a wine suggestion. Now that's just for scanning an object like if it's sitting on a shelf. If you scan a barcode, it'll work pretty seamlessly. But again, the whole thing that was impressed upon me was that, bam, you scan a thing, you see it on the thing, and then you can buy it. Now, interestingly, when I scanned another S8, it only gave me links to buy S8 accessories. I was thinking Samsung would jump at the opportunity to sell me more S8s. And the text function seems to work pretty well. If you scan a bit of text, it'll pick out that text and translate it for you to another language if you want to, or you can extract it, copy it, paste it, whatever you want to do. Now, as far as the translation feature is concerned, it was missing a few languages, weirdly enough, and there were major languages like Japanese, which I can get right now in the Google Translate app, which goes back to the fact that having to go to different apps to do this sort of thing wasn't really ruining me on a day-to-day basis. I know, again, it's a matter of convenience, I get that, just saying. And then there's the location scanning. So when it worked really well, and it was actually really cool. I'll give you a particular example where it worked super well. I was taking that sample video that you saw on that pier, and when I scanned the entire boardwalk, it would actually come up with a whole list of all the different establishments and restaurants and resorts that were nearby, how far away they were from me, how long it would take to get there. This was all directly integrated into Google Apps. So when it works really well. And then when it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. I'd find myself out and about trying to scan locations, which didn't come naturally to me. I guess this would be helpful if I were like traveling a lot, but honestly, I don't really lead that extravagant of a lifestyle. And by that extravagant, I mean I don't lead an extravagant lifestyle. I still have a bowl of ramen sitting over there. But yeah, like I said, when I was out and about, I'd try and scan a place and it would lag for a minute and then it wouldn't pull up anything. Or if I scanned a business, it just wouldn't tell me what that business was or where it was located. Maybe I was using it wrong. I mean, if I'm already at a place, I guess I don't really need to know where it is. Maybe I just don't know how to use it, but I just don't think I'm the target audience for this sort of thing. All in all, I think Bixby has a lot of potential, but where it stands right now, consistency seems to be its biggest problem, and the problem of all the features not being live yet. So with Bixby, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it goes once all the features are fully launched. So, I mean, where does all this leave us with the phone itself? I mean, we've got a great camera, we've got overall solid software, a wonky virtual assistant. I mean, where does all this go? I mentioned in my unboxing video that the S8 felt like kind of an incremental update to the S7 as far as the hardware was concerned. Do I still think that? Kinda. There's a lot of similarities between the S7 and the S8, and a lot of that comes down to the specs haven't changed a whole lot. Now, obviously, there's the upgraded processor, which seems to come in particular handy with the battery performance. I mean, besides that, we've got Bixby, which, as we've already beat to death, hasn't been fully launched yet. And that's pretty much it. Even when Bixby is fully functional, I don't see myself using it a whole lot. But the screen, it's just so pretty. I mean, honestly, going from an S7 Edge, I would be tempted to jump to the S8 for the screen alone, because there's so much to see and so much to like here. In particular, I like this continuing trend of seeing bigger and bigger screens in phones that maintain a sleeker and sleeker form factor. And I think the S8 is a really great example of that. I mean, even when I picked up my old S7 Edge, it feels clunky by comparison. That doesn't mean that the phone is a clumsy phone to hold, but it feels quite a bit wider, even though the size difference, oh my god, even though the size difference is only kind of incremental. You can kind of see here in my crude comparison that the size difference isn't that extreme. The S7 Edge is a touch wider, but having held this for a couple of weeks and then going back to this, I mean, it felt like I was holding like an iPhone 7 Plus or something. Anyways, I'm just kind of rambling at this point. Still kind of incremental, but the screen is super pretty, and maybe you'll have more uses for Bixby where I don't. But that's sort of where my feelings lie about it. I should probably stop rambling. I'm kind of tired. Well, I think that about does it for this time around. What do you think of the Samsung Galaxy S8? I think I already asked that in my unboxing video. You have an S8. What do you think about it? I don't really have anything else to ask. Oh, Bixby. Do you think you would use Bixby? Do you find a whole lot of use out of it as it is? I guess. I can't really think of anything else to talk about, and I'm sweating buckets underneath my shirt right now because it's really hot. I have to turn off the AC to do these because otherwise it's just too noisy in the background, and I think I'm just, maybe I'm having a heat stroke right now. Anyways, my name is Ken for TalkAndroid.com. Where'd it go? There it is. It's a duck. Oh, look at him go. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to PlayMobo. Thank you for sponsoring this video. PlayMobo is a mobile gaming and advertising company focused on providing mobile game related content. They are your ultimate one-stop shop for information on the top mobile games. They provide news, reviews, previews, cheats, walkthroughs, strats, trailers, offers, gift packs, and much more. Their editors study tens of thousands of mobile games on the market and only select and recommend the most elite ones for your enjoyment. And with their app, you can do a bunch of different stuff like browse through the latest news stories for the most popular games, discover top quality new games, master your favorite games with exclusive walkthroughs and tips, view curated list of the best mobile games by category, find deals and gift packs for the top mobile games, earn money by completing game tasks, and participate in discussions with thousands of other gamers. Make sure you check them out by going to playmobo.com, and also don't forget to download their app on the Google Play Store.